Hi everyone. Just want to say that if you've been affected by any of the issues in today's podcast, there's talk of some quite heavy things to do with drug taking, abuse, violence, crime, and suicide. So just to give you a little bit of a warning of that in advance, and do not suffer in silence. Speak to others, and there's a telephone number for Samaritans if you need to. Take it easy and look after yourselves. In the northwest of England. Check out the details on the website. Please support me on coffee.com if you can. Follow me on Twitter at North Podcasts, and feel free to share, spread the word, get involved at any level with North and South Podcasts. I'm with Hope Street. Today it's a real honour to introduce Stes, who is a volunteer at Hope Street. So, Steve, just before we get started, do you want to just say what your role is at Hope Street, or what kind of things you're involved in?
Yeah, sure, Tim. Yeah. Hi, guys. My name's T, and I'm a peer support volunteer with Hope Street. I also run a talk and fishing session on a Saturday morning in Latham. Anyone can come along. It's just there for being in the fresh air and getting out there, having a little chat and doing a little bit of fishing as a pastime. So if anyone's interested in that, give Hope Street a bell.
Excellent. And they'll be able to find details on the website and the notes as well. Excellent. I know you speak very well, Steve. I've heard you speak at meetings, and you're a very good speaker. And thanks for coming on today. I'm just first of all just going to throw this over to you then and say, what's your story? I don't know whether you want to talk about kind of your previous life, your current life, what your hopes are for the future, where you're at now. So just to throw that across to you really, and see where you want to start.
I think I've got to start off at the very beginning, haven't I? A lot of my demons all stem from when I was in my childhood. I grew up in a very, very poor family in an area of Liverpool, which basically all the families were the same. They all had no money. Jobs were short on the ground and things like that. So my parents didn't work. My mother was disabled. She had epilepsy. My dad basically looked after her. But like the one major thing at the time was I had a mentally handicapped brother who was in and out of residential care a lot of the time, sometimes through abuse that occurred in those centres. And he'd have spells where he'd come and live with us and spells living with them. And the dynamics of the family was all mixed up. It affected everybody within the family, do you know what I mean? So yeah, I had a bit of a troubled upbringing when I'd seen things at a very early age that a child should never see. Do you know what I mean? Some of the abuse that was put across to my brother in these residential places, because we used to go and visit him quite regularly on a weekly basis, and we'd go in and we'd see him with black eyes and cut nose and this, that, and the other, where he'd been assaulted either by other patients or by staff themselves. Do you know what I mean? I remember one occasion we went to a place and we were in visiting my brother Robbie, who was the eldest of us all. And a patient was tied to the bed, believe it or not, and it stunk of urine. Do you know what I mean? It really did stink. It's just, I have those vivid memories of the place now, of the smell of the place. It was quite vile. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that had an impact on me growing up, type of thing.
My uncle, who sadly died a few years ago, was physically and mentally disabled, and he was in an institution. Now, later in his life, he went into an actual an actual home, a house with other people, which was much better. But I remember when I was young going to visit him and being quite shocked by what I saw. But for you, that was your brother, and then you're seeing abuse, and he's coming back into the home environment, which is already tough. So you were talking about Liverpool. You're talking about like in the 80s when unemployment was high.
Yeah, it was originally it started off in the 70s, late 70s, when I must have only been about 7 years of age.
Yeah.
And we used to go and visit him at the age of 7 right the way through. I've got quite a vivid memory from then. I remember one time my brother came home and he had welts all down his leg, like he was coming home for a day visit. And he'd made his way back to the house on his own and he'd been beaten up. So my dad didn't like what had gone on. He went up there, threatened them all that he was going to take them to court and this, that, and the other. And they were out saying, no, please don't do that. So in the end, my dad just let it go and decided he wanted to bring him home to live with us. But the only problem is that he was doped up to the eyeballs with all sorts of medication. So he had to be weaned off this medication before it was like a drug addict, basically, and do like a detox of these tranquilizers that he was on. So that's when I've seen a lot of the other things that I mentioned before. Now, eventually, we got Robert home and living with us, and we had a social worker and all that who used to come out and check on us. We had the church involved with us because we were really, really poor. Do you know what I mean? We had nothing. I can remember these two guys used to come on a Sunday afternoon, early Sunday evening it was, and give me mum a brown envelope, and they were from the church, so they were giving like the family like money that they'd taken off the plate in the church, which was I found quite shocking. Do you know what I mean? I didn't realise what it was until like I started to grow up, and I thought, hang on a minute, what's that? And I realised what it was. But anyway, back to Robert, where he come to live with us. Every so often he'd go away on respite. A residential. Well, he went away one time, another place in Southport, and the first day he was there, he fell out of an upstairs window and broke his back. So he ended up in a wheelchair. Then he was, physically and mentally handicapped, which then put a massive, massive strain on the family. He couldn't live with us at the time because the house couldn't accommodate him. So what we had to do was move house. And a house was found for us in Club Moor, which is by Broadway. I don't know if you know it, Tim. Anyway, we had to move house, and we had to get this house adapted for wheelchair access. So that took a number of years before Robert was able to come back home. But in that time, I was thrust into an area of like sort of well-to-do people. Everyone around me, they all seem to have money. Do you know what I mean? When I went to school, all the parents had jobs. They all had decent clothing and all sorts of things like that. And I was just like, I used to go to town, to a charity place in town to get my clothes. There used to be a place on Duke Street where you go in, you come out with a little brown paper bag, and in that bag would be a set of clothes for you. Do you know what I mean? And that's basically what we got. So you can imagine all these kids with all the latest fashions, and here's me wearing a duffel coat and a pair of grey school pants and black shiny shoes, for going out after school type of thing. Do you know what I mean? So I was bullied at a very young age, and I didn't like school. Do you know what I mean? So I ended up sagging school quite a lot. I just never had no confidence at all, and that went right through to into the senior school. I played truant an awful lot. I was quite intelligent. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like I wasn't slow or I wasn't intelligent. I mean, I was intelligent. You know what I mean? I knew answers to things that were getting asked of me and things like that. But because of the environment and the way other people perceived me, I just sort of went into a shell and just stayed away from that. I then went into a sort of, my brother came home. We had the house adapted for him. So we were living in this house. My brother was with us. But all this time, like, my mum was still suffering from epilepsy. And my mum was a very, very cold person. She never, ever, ever showed love whatsoever. None. I think in the whole life, I can remember saying that she loved me once, and that was on her deathbed when she had dementia as well. So whether she was thinking I was somebody else or what, I think she had, looking back on it, I think she had her own problems. Do you know what I mean? Because there's times when she's been on respite herself or convalescence, That's what they used to call it in them days, when people were struggling with the mentality. They end up going on convalescence, wouldn't they? Gone for a few months or whatever. I had that right the way through growing up. There's been a time when I've been in foster care because my mum was going on a convalescence type of thing. Do you know what I mean? Which I didn't find out until a later stage. One of my siblings had said over a photograph, apparently, because when my mum passed away, I got a few photographs and a few bits and bobs, and I looked at this one photograph of me and I thought, oh, look, that I look clean and tidy on that. And my brother went to me, oh yeah, that's when you were in foster care. And I was like,
Really?
wow. But at the age of 13, I was sort of a reprobate then. I wanted attention. Do you know what I mean? I never got no attention from my parents. Everything was sort of around my brother and the injustice he's got by, going away and respiting and breaking his back and this, that, and the other. So I was sort of the black sheep of the family. So I thought to myself, all right, I'll be that. Do you know what I mean? So I used to go out, used to rob cars. I used to do fraud. I used to build society books and things like that. I went to prison for this, so I'm okay in saying this. We used to defraud like post office books and building society books, and I used to make money that way. And the money I made, I dressed myself properly. Do you know what I mean? Because I never had any decent clothes, so I used to dress myself and that. So it just, life just stemmed on from there. I had a few run-ins with the police, like for robbing cars and this, that, and the other, and then I sort of became, where I said I got bullied myself, I became a bully to a degree. I was sort of intrigued in that sort of way of life. I looked a lot older than I did, than my age when I was around about 14, 15. So I started going to pubs and nightclubs and things like that. And I thought, oh, this is the life. Do you know what I mean? And shortly afterwards, 17, I started working the doors. It opens up a new avenue for me, do you know what I mean? But at the same time, I started doing martial arts. I boxed as a kid. One of the things I used to do as a kid is over the weekend, I used to box. And that would get some of the frustrations out of me, do you know what I mean? And then I went into martial arts, and then that gave me another skill, do you know what I mean? So there were skills that were leaning me into one avenue type of thing, do you know what I mean? Which was obviously working on the doors.
Just before we get into that then, I mean, you've got a lot of adverse childhood experiences there, which are building up in your young life. And I said this on recently when I was talking about, growing up in Bootle. And, again, I look back at my youth and say I was very, very lucky. But growing up in tough areas and growing up in areas where there's not that much going on in terms of the economy, etc., it puts a lot of pressure on people that unless you've been through that, it's hard to explain to others. Do you know what I mean? So you're growing up at that tough time. You've got unbelievable adverse childhood experiences. And then at the age of 17, all of a sudden, you're in this adult world. You've already, broke the law, etc., got involved in all that. You want to do well for yourself. And all of a sudden, you're kind of in the adult world of being a bouncer on the doors at the age of 17. And I think that 17-year-old, it was like you'd lived a whole lifetime already. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, definitely, mate, definitely. I think childhood, I don't think I had a proper childhood because the amount of things that had gone on, both with my mum, my brother, and my dad as well, because he was a very quiet man, my dad. But no, it was me having to try and find my feet and find my place in the world. And then I worked at doors for a while, and I was okay. It was an interesting job. Do you know what I mean? I was fair. I wasn't like bouncers. When people, I hate the phrase bouncers. I call them doorman. Do you know what I mean? Because that's what they are. It is a profession. Do you know what I mean? And they're there for your people's safety. But I sort of took pride in what I'd done. Do you know what I mean? I looked after the places that I was on. Didn't cause trouble, and I could relate to people. Do you know what I mean? If need be, if things turned the other way and it became physical, well, I could also do that side of things as well. Do you know what I mean? But I tended to be more vocal, and I didn't see much troubles. It was sort of later in life when I met my wife and had my first kids that things sort of changed, because I was on and off the doors for like 20 years, and I drove a taxi cab, a Hackney, for a long time as well. Throughout the day, and I'd work the door overnight. So they were long hours. So I met my missus. She lived at the end of our street, believe it or not. And I'm still, thank God, I'm still with her now. Do you know what I mean? 29 years later, she's been my rock type of thing. Do you know what I mean? She's kept me in place and kept me level-headed now. But we've gone through a journey ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Because I've worked at numerous stores in Liverpool for numerous people. I'm not going to mention the places. Do you know what I mean? Because they're, some of the worst places in Liverpool you can go to. Do you know what I mean? But they were big venues. I'll say that they were big venues with a lot of trouble on them. So anyway, time went by, and I got an offer to work up in Manchester, and a mate of mine said to me, "Do you want to come up and take on this door for us?" And I said, "Yeah, all right, no problem." It wasn't actually in Manchester; it was in Newton Willows. So I took this door on. It had a lot of inherited trouble in the place, so I had to deal with that. And what I found was, right, basically, I was working for myself, but I needed to straighten this door out for it to become safe and viable for people. So it took a lot of effort, a lot of physical violence. And it was something that I thought, well, it's a business. This is how it goes, and this is how it should be done. And it didn't faze me at all. So I was on that place for a couple of months. Then the same friend coming to me and said, "Oh, we've got this other door here, Stes. Do you want to come and have a look at this one for us?" So I did the same with that door, and then a number of other doors. And because I was professional about what I'd done, I was quite in every door that this company was about to take over. It was always me who went in first, leveled it all out, and made sure that there were, not going to be any trouble for anybody anymore. Do you know what I mean? Now that led to me doing a lot of things that I'm totally not proud of as a person now. Violence was a daily thing. I think it turned a cog in my head, and even my home life, I became a very violent person. If someone said something wrong to me, I wouldn't hesitate and level them out on the floor. Do you know what I mean? And I wouldn't have any scruples about it. It wouldn't bother me whatsoever. And that continues and continues and continues. And I was doing more doors. Eventually, I looked after 18 doors and 32 shops for this one company. But in that sort of life, you don't come away unscathed, do you? I was paid to hear people, to collect money off people, to warn people off. There was a whole scenario of things that I'd done, and it was like a lot of it was related to around drugs and things like that. Now I ended up taking drugs myself at that point. Cocaine was offered to me at one point in a party, and once I took one line, I knew at that point that was going to be a problem for me. I knew, because it was too nice, and it blew my mind. And what I used to do then was I used it then as a coping mechanism for all the violence that I'd done. It calmed me down type of thing. It had a weird effect with me with cocaine. Cocaine sort of numbed me rather than send me onto a high. Do you know what I mean? I get all the feeling, all the buzz off it, but I'd be a little bit more shy and retarded. Do you know what I mean? I'd retreat with it, but I'd be able to do the jobs that I was doing. Do you know what I mean? It just gave me that little bit of a knife edge to be that nasty person that I was. So then that obviously created more problems then. Do you know what I mean? I was earning good money. I was on good money, but I was spending good money as well on it. But it didn't stop there. There was points where I couldn't get hold of coke because the dealers were off, and I ended up taking crack. I'd stop at a street worker and ask them, "Can she get hold of any crack?" And I'd end up sitting in a crack den smoking my head off, and then that led to taking heroin, then to come down off it. So I'd done like a 360 in drugs. Do you know what I mean? It was just absolutely insane. And I'd done that for 20 years. And it was just, we lost the house. We lost virtually everything that I worked for. I was still working. I was still doing the job, the things that I was doing. Do you know what I mean? And it was absolutely, life was just, I didn't expect to live long, to be honest with you. The role I had in work was just insane. I'd been shot at twice whilst I was doing business for people. I nearly took my hand off with a firearm. Just a crazy world. A total crazy world.
It's funny as well, isn't it? Because there's times I look back on in my life and I go, what were you thinking? What were you doing then? Oh, obviously, you know, I'm not saying I've been threatened remotely like what you've just described, but it's funny how when you're in the midst of that, you just can't seem to see it. I mean, at one level, you kind of know it's wrong and you know you can't cope, but you just caught up in everything, aren't you? And it just kind of becomes normalised. And
well, that's exactly what it was. Everything was normal. For me just to jump out the car and beat someone up in the road because he's pulled out on me wrong or looked at me wrong, funny or whatever. Right? That was the norm for me. My missus and the kids would be like that. If they seen someone do something in the road in front of me, they'd suddenly freeze because they'd know exactly what was going to come next, and I would just fly off the handle and just, you know, there'd be blood and guts flying everywhere, type of thing. But yeah, like I said before, I got shot at twice. I had a shotgun put in my face in one of my pubs. I had an automatic put down to one of my knees in another one, and it didn't faze me. Do you know what I mean? It really didn't faze me. It wasn't until I was sat in my car actually going to work one night, and I said to myself, "Am I coming home tonight?" And the chances are, the odds, you could say 50-50 or less than that. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, someone was out to kill me, weren't they, by shooting at me? Do you know what I mean? And I sat there and I thought, it wasn't the fact that that was going to happen. It was the fact that I wasn't bothered it was happening. Do you know, if that makes sense?
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I wasn't, that's what scared me, that I wasn't bothered. And in the end, I just said, oh, no, do you know what? I think I need a break here. I need to sit, you know, I've got the kids on the floor. I need to make a change in life.
And did you make it? Was it like that kind of moment that was a turning point, or was it a process?
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, I phoned them up. I said, "Oh, I'm not working tonight," and that caused a lot of trouble because, like, I was one of their main guys who looked after the whole system. Do you know what I mean? Is the way it worked is I didn't actually work on a door in the end. I sat off in a vehicle with a couple of other lads, and if issues occurred during the night, we get the phone call, we'll go in, clean up whatever was needed to be cleaned up, right? And then we'd leave before the police would turn up. So like the door team look as if they've controlled it when in fact it was us who went in and done it. Because there's different levels, you know, clubs and bouncers and night doors and nightclubs have got a total dark side to them, an absolute dark side. And I think that's what drew me into it. Do you know what I mean? From a young age of 17, that's what pulled me into it. And all the limelight, you know, the women, the drink, the drugs, the whole lot, just all sort of encompassed me. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was a mad sort of time of life. But I've got, like, now I'm 8 years clean of drugs. Well, no, it's longer than that now. I think it's near on 10. I look back at things and think to myself, how stupid and dangerous those times were.
So do you know that night when you said, I'm not coming in tonight? Did you not go back again?
No, I didn't
Or
go back again. No.
and
I
so
called it quits. That created a lot of trouble as well. You had all these doors that I took on their behalf. All the managers saying to them, well, if you haven't got to stay, you're not going to have this door type of thing. Do you know what I mean? So it was a bit of a... we agreed to disagree in the end, me and the guys. Do you know what I mean? I said, I'll leave them alone if they leave me alone. And basically that's the way it went.
yeah. So what happened the next day then? Were you on a process of just completely moving away from that kind of way of living? Did the drugs stop straight away, or what happened over the next few?
The drugs carries on, because it was the drugs was part of a life, wasn't it? And it's an addiction in the end. So the drugs carries on for quite a few years later. But obviously, I never had the means to pay for those drugs at that time. So we lost a house, loads of possessions and jewelry and all sorts of things like that. It was quite tough. I'm the type of person is if I say something, if I say I'm gonna do something, I do it. And I said to myself, I'm going to stop taking the drugs. And it took me a while, but I'd done it. Same as drink. It was drugs and drink type of thing. Do you know what I mean? Drugs to get high, the drink to come down type of thing. Do you know what I mean? Along with the heroin that went with it as well. I never became addicted to heroin, thank God. Do you know what I mean? Because I was only using it as a come down. Like some of the sites I've seen, sitting in crack dens with all sorts. It's just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane.
Do you drink alcohol now, or?
I do, yeah, I do in moderation. I don't have a problem with it. Whereas I would do if someone put a line of coke down, I'd be really offended by it. I really would be offended by it, but I wouldn't take it. I know I wouldn't take it. I probably could have ended up being an alcoholic if things carried on the way they were. Do you know what I mean? But we moved house to a new area. It was like a fresh start, a new beginning type of, away from the job, away from the dealers and all the rest of it. So I thought, no, this is a fresh start. So that's what I've done. We had a fresh start, cut all the drugs, cut the drink, and then move forward from there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an easy move. Do you know what I mean? Because what happened, that was all self-medicating the things from my childhood right the way through. Do you know what I mean? You mentioned it before, adverse childhood memories and things like that. I had loads of those. I had a big bag full of issues that I was hanging, that I had around my neck type of thing. My brother passed away during that time when I was on the doors, which I never showed no feelings for. My dad passed away when I was 21, so I never showed no feelings there. My mum passed away 2014, but I never showed no. I showed more feeling in that way, compared to the others.
But that was when you gave up the drugs as well. Do you think that was a link between not using the drugs and showing emotion for your mother? Was it around the same time?
I think I wasn't self-medicating at that time. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm getting at with my mum was, if she never showed any affection to me, I was always the bad one. I'm the bad apple, this, that, and the other. She never loved me, never showed affection, borderline on hatred. Do you know what I mean? Or that's what I could see. But what it was with my mum is when she passed away, but she had this little box, and I opened this box up, and all my school reports and everything was all in this box. And I thought to me, wow, it blew me head. It ended up blowing me head. I ended up in Stoddard House. I had a bit of a breakdown, which I've had quite a few, by the way. I've not mentioned those yet, but obviously because the lifestyle I've had and all the difficulties, my mental health has been absolutely rubbish. It's it's a fighting battle, and I think it's going to be there because of the way I grew up. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, so it's a thing where people crave love and affection and attention of people. Do you know what I mean? And that's all down to like me past and the way things were.
Do you know when you have been sectioned, or do you mind me using that word? Do you know when that's happened? This is something that I've never really experienced or spoken to someone directly about. How does that happen? What kind of processes need to happen? Can someone go and seek help, or is it family members or elements of both? How does that kind of happen? Have you got the mindfulness to say, right, I need help here, and I need to?
No, the first time I've made a number of attempts on my life, and they're the trigger points. And then once I've been in hospital, they've identified that, and then they said, right, you're going to see the mental health team, the crisis team, and then the crisis team then have deemed it that you either need a hospital admission or they can deal with you in the community. But I think I've had about 8 or 9 admissions in 10 years or thereabouts. Some of them are pretty regular.
Have any of them been prolonged, or do they tend to be a short spell?
Some of them have been it. Sometimes I've been in 2 months. I've been in for 6 weeks. I've been in for a month a couple of times. The others about 2 weeks, a fortnight. It depends on how ill I got. It really depended on how bad I was. What hits me now, right, after all that and all those drugs and all the demons I've gone on in the past, I regret so much. It's hard to hold your head up high when when I used to collect money for people, I wasn't a very nice person. I was very professional in what I'd done. I made sure I got what was owing, right? Or I was scaring someone enough that they weren't going to bother somebody else ever again. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've done life-changing injuries to people, and that all now comes back and haunts me every single night of the week. I have night terrors so real. It's like I'm dragged right back into that old state, and you know, I feel it's karma. Do you know what I mean? To pay me back for the things that I've done, and the guilt of losing a house, losing money, not being there as a proper father. Do you know what I mean? To me kids, my kids never went without. I always got them stuff. What I'd do is I'd turn up after me being away all weekend, and I go, yeah, there's so much money. Yeah, there's that for you, that's for you, that for you. So we sort of like buy me friendship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, the hospitalisation, it's not a good thing. It's it's a means to an end, and it has to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I want to speak to, I mean, that's a whole different podcast. I don't know if you'd be interested in talking about that aspect of things in more detail another time. And that's something that I'd like to throw out there to other people about that. And also I want to speak to mental health professionals and people who deal with medication, etc. But where are you at the moment? I mean, have you tried different forms of counselling, different types of medications? Are you still on that journey of trying to come to terms with all that?
I've done various types of counselling. I've done EDMR, which is like a light movement thing. It is. It's supposed to help with. I've got PTSD off being shot at. That with the night terrors and all the rest of it is just. It's a long process. Do you know what I mean? And my medication has changed and changed and changed. Do you know what I mean? Over the years, I've been on all sorts of medication, which I'm on like quite a lot of heavy stuff at the moment. Me stopping all the stuff that I used to do, turning a leaf, turning the corner and doing something nice and being with nice people and all that would solve all that problem. But it's not. It's like a rocky road, and I get to a point where I think, what's the point? Do you know what I mean? I've got to that point, a few weeks ago, I thought to myself, well, no matter what you do, things aren't going to change. I made an attempt a few weeks ago on my life, and thank God I wasn't successful. But I took in the region of about 120 paracetamol. Yeah, and it didn't work. So, but then it's explaining the stuff to your missus why you want to do it. It's not that I don't want to be with her. It's just that I don't want this stuff in my head any longer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that it doesn't. I mean, I've had issues with depression, anxiety, and when you're in that lowest ebb, it's such a powerful feeling. It's like nothing else matters. And I remember reading a book by a guy who was describing when his depression was really bad, and he said, "Do you know that feeling when you're like about to be physically sick and it's horrible?" He said, "Imagine that all over for like prolonged spells of time." And I remember thinking, that's a good summation of what that powerful feeling is like.
Yeah.
And when you're there, you would do stuff, you would do silly things. And sometimes you navigate it well, sometimes you navigate it and go,
see, you don't see it as a silly thing, do you? That's the thing. Like, I found myself, when I made the decision to do it, I was quite calm and collect. Do you know what I mean? And I'll come back to a girl, a young girl, a family friend. Was it a year summer gone? It was. She was in our house playing with the baby, doing TikTok dances and all sorts. She was in the back garden having a laugh and a joke. It was summertime. We were having lolly ices and we had the swimming pool out and all the rest of it. That young girl, 21, went home that night and hung herself. And that really smashed my head, because I was thinking, well, I suffer from depression. Why couldn't I have seen it? Why couldn't I have dealt with that? Do you know what I mean? But it's a common thing, right? Is that when you've made that decision that you're going to end your life, right? Is that you get some peace.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You get an inner peace, and then you're relaxed about it. Do you know what I mean? Because you know all your problems are going to be over. That's what it is. When I think of that now, I think that's what happened. You know, it's like Robin Williams and all them.
There's a few people I know. There's a few people who I know who've explained that, like, and I know something I've read about. Like, once you make that decision, you kind of get a peace of mind about it all.
Yeah.
But it is strange. In any one day, you can have an up and a real downer, and it's just such a strange thing to explain to someone, that feeling of just doom, what it's like. It's just so powerful, and you try to get through it.
I think it's different for everybody. Everyone's demons are different, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? But the outcome is very, very similar.
And it's very, very final. And obviously I'll put details of Samaritans and phone, like, numbers and sites which can help people in the notes for this podcast. But you know, I met you about a year ago. Lovely guy, very confident. You know, you look like you wouldn't harm a fly, etc. And you know, I've had times in the past where people have said to me when I've said I've had depression, and you go, "Oh, you know, you seem fine," etc. And it is funny when you've got these things going on inside you, our external world. I mean, you can be good 1 minute and feel bad an hour later, and sometimes you might feel bad for an hour, a day, weeks, months, sometimes years. And it is hard, and it is about being mindful about those situations and knowing what you need to do. But you know, you've got a lot of family and support mechanisms around you. How important are they to you?
They're very important. Do you know what I mean? See, what I hide a lot though as well.
Yeah.
I hide a lot from my family, because what I do is I play the fool throughout the day. Do you know what I mean? I'm happy and laddie and everything's okay. And while they're around me, and same with everybody. If I meet you in the streets, I'll be all laughing and joking and all the rest of it. But inside, my stomach's turning. I've got that horrible, nasty, horrible feeling inside. But I've learned over the years to put this fracas up type of thing. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, there's nothing wrong with me. But usually, like when the house goes quiet, say when Mrs. goes to bed, and there's no one round, that's when it's like a grenade goes off inside my head. Do you know what I mean? And I sit there ruminating and going over everything that I've done, doing the pros and cons and all the rest of it. It always works out negative, negative, negative. It's hard to see the good stuff that I've done.
How important are things like, you know, you do gardening and you fishing? Do you find them very mindful and helpful?
I think things like that are very important. It's a form of mindfulness, isn't it? To get you in the moment, isn't it? That you need to be, rather than dwell on the past or worry about the future. It's the here and now, and you're actually dealing with something there and then, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know, gardening is absolutely fantastic. You get to see something grow, what you've created. So, and you can eat it as well. So it's win-win, isn't it? You know what I mean? Yeah. The fishing is another aspect as well. Concentrating levels are really high, so you're on the go all the time. Plus, you're out in in Mother Nature, aren't you, as well? Yeah. So that's another good thing. Whether it's cold or sunny or what, doesn't matter with me. I go out in the winter when it's iced over; it doesn't bother me.
It is beautiful getting out there, isn't it? And I know you go on the camping trips for Uppbeat as well. Do you know?
Yeah, the cat there, because I love the countryside. Yeah. I've had my time in cities. If someone gave me 5 nightclubs and said, "Steve, they're yours, you can have them," right? I'd sell them the very next day. That's what I'd do. I wouldn't have them. Do you know what I mean?
Go straight to the countryside.
If possible, if I won the lottery, I'd move out into the countryside, and be like Lord of the Manor. That's my philosophy of that. Yeah.
Do you know? Do you know that for you? I know the night time and the evenings can be difficult. What strategies do you use to kind of offset those? If they're the times when it's not good, are the things that you do, like hobbies? I know you can't really garden and fish during the night time, but what do you decide to do to offset that?
I make bottles. I do. It's another thing I do as well. Do you like Airfix models?
Yeah.
Right. I do them. Yeah, and they keep me quite busy, or I listen to music. I'm really big music buff. I like Floyd, the Doors, the Stones, Elton John, Peter Gabriel, all that type of thing. Do you know what I mean? So I'll sit there and listen to all that, and then that'll chill me out before I take my nighttime meds and then go to bed.
Yeah. I think these night terrors as well, they are very concerning. I know something. Sheila said something on Facebook before about night terrors, and they effectively, just for people who don't know, I've experienced them in the past, where you wake up kind of screaming, stuff flashing through your head, that kind of thing. They can be very scary, and then it affects your sleep patterns, and then you're tired the next day. It kind of compounds, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I have different sorts of sleep patterns. I have night terrors where I do wake up and I'm in a panic, and I'm having a panic attack there and then. Other times I'll just wake up and I am absolutely covered from head to toe in sweat. And I mean, it's like I have to change the sheets, the bed and everything, or put a towel on the bed because everything's soaking. And they're like the flashbacks of where I've been at, you know what I mean? As I said before, I've been shot at twice. One just hit a wall behind my head and the other one went through the back door of my car. They're the mild things. I've been slashed, I've been stabbed. I've had loads of things, you know what I mean? I'm laughing and joking about it now because I've got a lot more mature now. If it was a younger me talking that now, I'd be like effing and blind and I'm wanting to go and find these and, do whatever, do whatever to them, do you know what I mean? But I'm not that person no more. I'm a lot more, as you say, I wouldn't, unless someone really upset me, and they'd have to really upset me for me to rise. But I wouldn't go down those. But I've got a lot of hobbies. Sometimes things aren't enough, and you do need to seek advice, and you do need to seek help, like the Samaritans. And if you are struggling, it's the crisis team. Do you know what I mean? Don't sit there and suffer in silence and leave it to the last minute, and then, you know, trying to take your own life. There is help out there. People
Yeah.
will help you. Do
I
you know what I
think
mean?
that
Hope Street is fantastic in that respect. I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for them. They've given me a lot of foresight into things, and they've made me change. I let on to people in the street now. Do you know what I mean? Which I would never have done in a month of Sundays before. And I'm enjoying what's around me. You know what I mean? And the people that are around me as well.
fantastic. I think that's a good place to end it on. Steve, thanks very much for telling me your story. And you know, you've been through a lot, and I just want to say the way you say that, you know, you look at it as karma sometimes to try and explain or rationalize how you're feeling, but I think you've been through a lot, mate, and I think it's natural for someone to say, "Oh, maybe I deserve this deep down," but you know, I think you've been through a lot, and the way that you've turned things around and the way you're moving forward is such an inspiration. Thanks for speaking. Thanks for your positivity as well, and for showing us that no matter what, there's always that chance to turn things around and to move forward. When I spoke to my dad as well, I think it's a generational thing. I said, "Have you got any regrets of anything that you want to do in the future?" And he just looked at me and went, "Behave yourself." You know, I think men, going back to what you said earlier as well, we do bottle things up, don't we? And we do keep a lot inside. And I think we find it hard to talk to people.
It's hard, isn't it? I remember the first breakdown I had. I used to be able to, I could throw 21 balls in the air and catch every one of them. Right. When I had the breakdown, I couldn't even juggle one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was that bad. And it's just like, you don't see it coming. Whereas like now, I've learned so much from my past mental health and how it peaks and troughs. Do you know what I mean? So I know when I'm dipping. So I can sort of try and grab a hold of it somewhere and not let it be as defining as it is.
Yeah, no, I think as well, you've got to be aware of your triggers, and you notice things, don't you? And I think that you can preempt those things and
Yeah.
and try and